He was the greatest footballer Italy had ever seen. He earned what would be worth over $50 million today, and when he died, the tax police had already confiscated his watches, his earrings, because he couldn't pay what he owed. This isn't one unlucky player. This is not a one-off tragedy. This happens to half of all professional footballers. By the time you finish this video, you're going to understand exactly how and why some of the richest athletes on the planet ended up with nothing, and more importantly, what it teaches us about money that most players never learn until it's already gone. Let's start with the number that should stop you in your tracks. According to a 2023 study by the UNFP, the French Professional Players Union, 50% of footballers are broke within 5 years of retiring. Half. And it's not just football. For NBA players, that number climbs to 60%. For NFL players, 78% face serious financial trouble within just 2 years of hanging up their cleats. Think about that. These are people who, at 25 years old, are earning more in a single week than most people earn in a year. And yet, more often than not, within a few years of the whistle blowing for the last time, it's gone. Today we're going to walk through 6 of the biggest names in football history, how much they made, how they lost it, and the pattern hiding underneath every single one of these stories. Let's start with a name every football fan knows, whether they ever saw him play or not. George Best, Manchester United legend, European Footballer of the Year in 1968. Widely considered one of the most naturally gifted players to ever step onto a pitch. In the 1960s, Best was earning around £30,000 a year, which, at the time, was close to the salary of an entire average household. He wasn't just a footballer, he was one of the first football superstars. Sponsorship deals, magazine covers, a level of fame the sport had barely seen before, but George Best had a problem that money could never fix. He drank, he gambled, he spent on fast cars and a lifestyle that never slowed down, not even when the football did. In his own words, when asked what happened to all the money he made, he simply said he spent it on, quote, booze, birds, and fast cars. And the rest, he just squandered. By the mid-2000s, George Best was being examined by a bankruptcy court. He needed urgent hospital treatment for liver failure, and the hospital had to waive a bill of £100,000 because he simply didn't have the money to pay it. In November 2005, George Best died, one of the greatest players who ever lived, and he died with nothing left. Case 2. Paul Gascoigne, known to every England fan simply as Gazza, is remembered as one of the most naturally talented midfielders his country has ever produced. Tottenham, Lazio, Rangers, Middlesbrough. At his peak, Gascoigne was earning over £1 million a year in wages alone, with boot sponsorship deals worth another $1 million on top of that. Over the course of his career, he built a personal fortune estimated at £20 million. By 2016, Paul Gascoigne was declared bankrupt. He owed more than £50,000 in unpaid taxes. His well-documented struggles with alcohol and his mental health didn't just take a toll on his body, they drained his finances just as fast as they drained everything else. And here's the part that matters most. Gascoigne's fall wasn't caused by one catastrophic decision. There was no single bad investment, no one scandal. It was years of a life spiraling, with nobody in his corner equipped to protect the money while it was still there. Case 3. David James. You might assume goalkeepers are the careful ones. The last line of defense, on and off the pitch. David James proves that assumption wrong. Across a 25-year career at clubs like Liverpool, Manchester City, Aston Villa, West Ham and Portsmouth, James earned an estimated £20 million, at his peak, taking home £50,000 a week. In May 2014, David James filed for bankruptcy. The trigger, by most accounts, was an expensive divorce back in 2005, followed by a string of financial decisions that never quite recovered. To settle his debts, auctioneers sold off his personal collection, signed shirts, boots, even his own DJ equipment. One of his England shirts, the one he wore in a World Cup win over Argentina in 2002, sold at that auction for just £672. A piece of football history sold off to cover debt. Case 4. Keith Gillespie. Keith Gillespie was once called the next George Best. He trained in the same academy as Beckham, Giggs and Scholes at Manchester United and went on to win 80 caps for Northern Ireland, still their most capped player in history. By his own calculation, and Gillespie has been remarkably open about this, he lost more than £7.2 million over the course of his career. Not through one disaster. Through years of gambling. A failed investment in a film financing scheme, bad decisions in the property market. In 2010, at just 35 years old, Keith Gillespie was declared bankrupt. And this is where a pattern really starts to show itself. It's almost never a single catastrophic mistake. It's death by 1,000 cuts, small decisions, repeated for years, with nobody stepping in to stop it before it's too late. Case 5. Now here's one of the most jaw-dropping numbers in this entire video. Ronaldinho, two-time FIFA World Player of the Year, Ballon d'Or winner, Champions League champion with Barcelona, World Cup winner with Brazil in 2002. One of the most beloved, most skillful players the sport has ever produced. Over his career, Ronaldinho built a fortune reportedly worth more than £70 million. After retiring in 2015, he tried to reinvest that money, launching his own esports organization, his own brand of gin, a wine company, even dabbling in music. Almost none of it worked. By 2018, Brazilian tax authorities came looking for unpaid taxes tied to properties he owned. They went through his bank accounts to try and recover what he owed. What did they find? $6. $6. In the bank account of a man who was once one of the most famous athletes alive. Brazilian authorities ended up seizing 57 of his properties in an attempt to recover what he owed the state. And Ronaldinho isn't even the only case like this in his own dressing room. Former Arsenal defender Emmanuel Eboue has spoken publicly about a divorce that emptied a joint account he thought he had full access to, waking up, in his words, with no control over money he had spent a career earning, at one point unable to even afford somewhere to live. Case 6. Diego Maradona. For millions of fans, the greatest footballer who has ever lived. Maradona's tax battle in Italy became one of the strangest financial sagas in the history of sport. He was hit with a tax debt reportedly worth €39 million, around $53 million, stemming all the way back to his years at Napoli in the 1980s. Italian authorities didn't stop at freezing bank accounts. At one public event, police confiscated 2 Rolex watches directly off his wrist, worth around $15,000. On another occasion, at a health clinic, they took the diamond earrings he was wearing. When Diego Maradona died in November 2020, reports suggested he had as little as £75,000 sitting in his account, despite an estate that may have included tens of millions of pounds in property, cars and image rights spread across multiple countries. A man surrounded on paper by extraordinary wealth and almost nothing sitting in the bank. So why does this keep happening, over and over, to some of the richest athletes on earth? When you look at these 6 stories side by side, 3 reasons show up again and again. Reason 1. Footballers peak financially in their 20s, decades before most people even start earning real money, with essentially zero financial education to match that income. Nobody hands a 22-year-old a finance degree along with their first big contract. Reason 2. The people around them, agents, family members, so-called friends, often have direct access to that money, and not always with the player's best interests at heart. We saw it with Ronaldinho's failed business ventures. We saw it with Emmanuel Eboue, whose joint account disappeared almost overnight during a divorce. And reason 3, when the paychecks stop, when a career ends, often while a player is still in his early 30s, the lifestyle around them doesn't stop with it. Multiple properties, cars, family members and friends who've come to depend on that income. None of that shrinks automatically just because the salary does. Put those 3 things together, and you get a system that hands 20-something-year-olds more money than most people will see in an entire lifetime, without ever teaching them how to keep it. From George Best in the 1960s to Ronaldinho in the 2010s, 5 decades apart, completely different eras of football, the pattern is identical. Incredible talent, extraordinary wealth, and almost none of it survives retirement. These aren't really stories about football, they're stories about money, and what happens when nobody ever teaches you how to protect it. And here's the part that stings the most. Almost every single one of these players, once they opened up about it, said the same thing. They wished someone had warned them sooner.